Whispers in the night. The message was terse, brutal in its simplicity. Unschooled, jagged letters clawed across cheap, lined paper. Beware the Ides of March. They plot against you within. No signature offered a clue. No further explanation complicated the stark warning. Traoré ran his eyes over it once more, the glow of his desk lamp painting elongated shadows across his worried features. He discovered it slipped beneath the door to his office after a grueling meeting addressing the famine clawing at the Sahel. Now, those desperate reports of parched earth and skeletal children felt distant, eclipsed by the icy dread blooming in his gut. He sank back into the embracing leather of his chair, which groaned in protest. His gaze settled on a framed photograph. Youthful soldiers, grinning with revolutionary fervor, snapped shortly after the coup. He remembered their names, their ambitions. Had the fire in their eyes dwindled? Had avarice or raw power become a substitute for idealism? They plot against you within. The phrase clawed at his thoughts, a sour note in the otherwise hushed palace. Who were they? And who risked so much to alert him? Was it General Cyr, the grizzled minter who'd guided him since his academy days? An impossibility, wasn't it? Cyr had always been his bedrock, his unwavering shield. Or had he misread the man? Traoré kneaded his temples, a headache tightening its grip. He loathed this creeping distrust, this venomous seed threatening to corrupt every judgment. His ministers? Some were ambitious, granted but never subtle. He'd always prized forthrightness, even when abrasive. Still, aspiration could be a treacherous current, pulling even the well-intentioned into dangerous waters. Then there were the foreign powers, circling Burkina Faso like vultures, their self-serving agendas barely concealed behind promises of assistance. They'd attempted to bend his ear, to influence policy, but he'd stood firm, guarding his nation's autonomy. Could they be manipulating his own countrymen, dangling promises of riches and influence? He crushed the note, the paper whispering like autumn leaves underfoot, dismissing it was impossible. He'd witnessed too much, endured too many betrayals in his lifetime, to ignore such a blatant threat. Yet a rash reaction, a sweeping investigation, could fracture the military, ignite paranoia. He needed precision, a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. He needed someone he could stake his life on, someone capable of uncovering the truth without raising alarms. His eyes locked onto the intercom. Captain Zongo, unflinching, resourceful, incorruptible to his core. A man of few words, his actions thundered. He'd proven his mettle time and again, during the revolution and its chaotic aftermath. Traoré trusted him implicitly, a rare and precious commodity. He hesitated, his finger hovering. Trust was fragile, easily shattered. Rebuilding, it was an act of Sisyphean futility. But he had no choice. He needed Zongo's particular brand of quiet intensity. He pressed the button. "Bring Captain Zongo to my office," he commanded, his voice betraying nothing of the turmoil within. The silence stretched, punctuated by the grandfather clock's relentless ticking, each chime a stark reminder of the dwindling hours. A light rap at the door. "Enter," Traoré called. Zongo materialized, ramrod straight, his gaze sharp and focused. Lean muscle and quiet resolve seemed to radiate from him. "Captain," Traoré greeted, rising. "Thank you for your promptness." Zongo offered a curt nod, his eyes never wavering. "You requested my presence, Mr. President." Traoré gestured toward the chair. "Please be seated." "I prefer to stand, sir." Traoré understood the implicit statement. Zongo was always on guard, always ready. He rounded the desk, extending the crumpled paper. "I received this earlier." Zongo accepted the note, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the message. He lifted his gaze, a silent question hanging in the air. "Investigate," Traoré instructed, his voice a low, steady current. "Discreetly. I want to avoid unnecessary panic, but this cannot be ignored." Zongo's nod was slow, deliberate. "Understood, Mr. President." "I must know who is behind this," Traoré pressed. "And their goals." but proceed with absolute certainty before acting. False accusations would be catastrophic. I will be both thorough and discreet, sir, Zongo affirmed, his voice a calm anchor. Traoré met his gaze, searching for any tremor of doubt, any flicker of hesitation. He found only unwavering commitment. He had chosen wisely. I trust you, Zongo, he stated, his voice softening. Beyond all others. Zongo's face remained impassive, but Traoré detected a faint shift in his eyes. Gratitude, perhaps, or merely acknowledgement of the formidable burden placed upon him. I will not fail you, Mr. President, Zongo pledged. Traoré nodded. I know you won't. Begin at once, and keep me apprised of your findings. Zongo's nept a sharp salute. Yes, sir. He turned and vanished, his footsteps absorbed by the opulent carpet. Traoré watched him depart, a wave of fragile relief mingling with mounting apprehension. He had set events in motion, yet the days ahead loomed, fraught with uncertainty. With trust a shattered commodity, Burkina Faso's destiny might well rest on the outcome of Zongo's investigation. He returned to his chair, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. He lifted the photograph, studying the faces so brimming with youthful hope. He prayed they hadn't succumbed to corruption, that the dream of a better nation still flickered within them. He closed his eyes, seeking guidance, strength, the wisdom to navigate the perilous road stretching before him. The whispers had begun, and he knew they would soon swell into a deafening roar. The captain's dilemma. The polished mahogany of Traoré's desk gleamed under the soft lamplight. The room, usually a hub of activity, felt unusually still. Traoré leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. Captain Zongo, you understand the gravity of this situation? Zongo, a man built like a brick house, but with eyes that missed nothing, nodded. Yes, Mr. President. Treachery within the ranks is a cancer. Precisely. And like any cancer, it must be excised before it consumes us. This letter, it accuses General Cyr of plotting against me, against the revolution. Traoré's voice held a note of profound disappointment. Cyr is a decorated officer, a man I have trusted implicitly, but I cannot ignore such a warning. Lives are at stake. Zongo accepted the charge. I will conduct a discreet investigation, Mr. President. My loyalty is to Burkina Faso and to you. Discreet is paramount, Captain. This must not become public knowledge. Suspicion breeds instability. Observe Cyr. His movements, his conversations, his demeanor. Leave no stone unturned, but do so subtly. I do not want to provoke anything prematurely. Report directly to me and me alone. Traoré paused, a shadow crossing his face. Trust no one else in this matter, Zongo. Absolutely no one. This rot could be deeper than we imagine. Zongo left the presidential palace with a heavy heart. The air, thick with the scent of dust and bougainvillea, did little to lighten his mood. General Cyr. The man was a legend, a stoic soldier who had fought bravely during the border conflicts. The thought that he could be involved in a coup was almost unthinkable. Zongo began his surveillance the following morning. He positioned himself in a small cafe across from the military headquarters, a strategic vantage point that allowed him to observe the building's main entrance and General Cyr's usual arrival route. He sipped his bitter coffee, watching the ebb and flow of military personnel. General Cyr arrived precisely at 700 hours, his uniform immaculate, his bearing as upright and unyielding as ever. He exchanged brisk salutes with the guards and disappeared inside. Zongo felt a flicker of unease. There was something off. Cyr seemed more withdrawn than usual, his eyes darting around as if he were expecting something. For the next few days, Zongo maintained his vigil. He tracked Cyr's movements, noting every meeting, every phone call, every interaction. He requisitioned Cyr's communication logs, a task that required navigating a labyrinth of bureaucratic red tape and arousing minimal suspicion. The logs themselves were a tangled mess of encrypted messages and coded conversations. Zongo, thankfully, had a knack for deciphering such things. He spent hours poring over the data, his brow furrowed in concentration. One particular exchange caught his attention. A series of encrypted messages between Sear and an unknown number, using a cipher Zongo recognized as a variation of the Vigenère square, employed frequently by foreign intelligence services. The content, once decrypted, was chilling. Coordinates, troop movements, dates and times. It painted a picture of a coordinated military operation. A coup. Zongo felt a cold dread wash over him. The anonymous letter was right. Sear was indeed plotting against Traoré. But who was he working with? And what was their ultimate goal? He observed Sear meeting with various officers, their conversations hushed, their faces obscured by the shadows of the military headquarters. He saw a flicker of impatience in Sear's eyes during a tense conversation with Colonel Ba, an ambitious officer known for his ruthless efficiency. Zongo sensed a power struggle brewing within the conspiracy. The weight of his discovery pressed down on Zongo. He was walking a tightrope, balancing loyalty with the need to expose a dangerous conspiracy. One wrong step, and everything could come crashing down. He knew he had to act, and act decisively. He needed more evidence, solid proof to present to Traoré. The future of Burkina Faso depended on it. Shadows and secrets. The digital clock on Zongo's desk blinked 3:17. The air in his small office hung thick with the stale scent of cheap coffee and nervous sweat. He rubbed his tired eyes, the glow of the laptop screen burning after hours of relentless work. The encrypted messages lifted from General Sear's personal server were proving to be a stubborn puzzle. He tried every known cipher used by the Burkinabe military, but nothing. Finally, he'd resorted to brute force, running complex algorithms that slowly chewed through every conceivable combination. A ping, soft but insistent, broke the silence. The decryption program had found a match. A wave of adrenaline washed over Zongo as the garbled text resolved itself into coherent French. Rendezvous point Echo 7. Midnight. Bring the package. Moreau will confirm arrangements. Moreau. Isabelle Moreau, the French attaché. Zongo felt a cold dread creep into his stomach. He copied the message and ran another program, tracing the IP address. It bounced through several servers, cleverly masked, but eventually resolved to a secure line registered to the French embassy. He read further. The messages alluded to troop movements, logistical support, and a change of leadership. The plan, as far as he could decipher, involved isolating the president, seizing key government buildings, and announcing the formation of a new military council. Sear was clearly the orchestrator, but the extent of Moreau's involvement was deeply troubling. Zongo knew he couldn't act solely on encrypted messages. He needed concrete evidence. Echo 7, he recalled, was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, near the old railway depot. He decided to see for himself. That night, under the shroud of a new moon, Zongo, dressed in civilian clothes, parked his unmarked Peugeot a safe distance from the warehouse. The air was thick with the smell of dust and diesel. He moved silently, sticking to the shadows, his hand resting on the Beretta tucked into his waistband. Through a crack in the corrugated iron wall, he saw them. Sear, unmistakable in his tailored uniform, stood talking to two other officers, their faces obscured by the darkness. Moreau, her blonde hair gleaming faintly in the moonlight filtering through a broken window, stood slightly apart, a small, elegant figure amidst the rough surroundings. He couldn't hear their words clearly, but the tension in the air was palpable. Sear gestured emphatically, his voice a low rumble. Moreau nodded, her expression unreadable. A fourth man, stocky and heavily armed, emerged from the shadows, carrying a large metal case. He placed it at Sear's feet. Zongo recognized the other two officers, Colonel Bamba, commander of the Presidential Guard, and Lieutenant Colonel Diallo, head of the Armored Division. Their presence confirmed his worst fears. The conspiracy ran deep, reaching the very heart of the government. The meeting broke up quickly. The officers dispersed in separate vehicles. Moreau lingered for a moment, speaking privately with Sear before being driven away in a black sedan with diplomatic plates. Zongo retreated, his mind reeling. He had the evidence he needed, but the implications were staggering. Traoré was surrounded by traitors. He had to warn him, but who could he trust? Back in his office, the first rays of dawn painting the sky a pale orange, Zongo drafted his report. Concise, factual, damning. He included copies of the decrypted messages, photographs taken at the warehouse, and a detailed analysis of the potential threats. He arrived at the presidential palace as Traoré was finishing his morning prayers. The president, still in his simple white bubu, greeted him with a weary smile. "Zongo, my friend, what brings you here so early?" Zongo handed him the report. Traoré's smile faded as he began to read. The lines on his face deepened with each passing page. He read in silence, his eyes scanning the text with laser focus. Finally, he looked up, his gaze piercing. Is this true?" Zongo met his eyes. "I have seen it with my own eyes, Mr. President. The evidence is irrefutable." Traoré rose and walked to the window, staring out at the city awakening below. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on his shoulders. He turned back to Zongo, his voice low but firm. "Thank you, Zongo. You have done your duty. Now, we must decide what to do." He paused, a flicker of steel in his eyes. "This treachery will not stand. The general's betrayal." Zongo placed the incriminating file on the desk, the chilled leather a stark contrast to his damp hands. Inside lay a tapestry of treason. Leaked transmissions laid bare, snapshots of shadowy meetings, bank ledgers singing tales of illicit wealth. Sandalwood incense mingled with a palpable sense of doom. Traoré, rigid as a statue, hadn't stirred. His gaze was lost in the distant cityscape, the Ouagadougou skyline shimmering under the oppressive sun. The silence that followed Zongo's summation was a suffocating blanket. "Sire," Traoré finally breathed, the name a gravelly whisper. Zongo lowered his head. "The proof is irrefutable, sir." Traoré rose and drifted to the window. No word, no tremor of emotion betrayed the turmoil within, yet Zongo felt the storm brewing. The president, a paragon of principle, valued loyalty and trust above all else. This treachery, at the hands of a man he considered a brother, was a dagger to the heart. A flash of memory, sun-baked earth, the snap and crackle of a campfire, the youthful exuberance of idealistic officers envisioning a brighter Burkina Faso. It was during their training, those years ago, that Traoré and Sire had become inseparable. They had pushed each other through hardship, debated philosophies till dawn. Sire, the captivating strategist, the staunch patriot. Or so it had seemed. Ibrahim, Sire had declared one starlit night, conviction ringing in his tone, "We will reshape this nation. We will forge a homeland where our people prosper, unshackled by corruption and tyranny." Traoré squeezed his eyes shut against the sting of that memory. The burden of leadership, the weight of a nation's hopes, suddenly felt crushing. He turned back, his face etched with a weariness that belied his years. "The motivation? Power, sir," Zongo stated, his voice devoid of inflection. "And influence." Attaché Moreau promised substantial financial aid, along with political sway on the global stage. The pieces clicked into place, revealing a bleak portrait of avarice and betrayal. The murmurs he had dismissed, the subtle maneuvers he had attributed to mere ambition, all threads in a larger, more malevolent design. And the others? Traoré murmured, scarcely audible. Zongo recited a list. Colonel Bamba, Commander Diallo, a host of pivotal figures within the Presidential Guard. Men Traoré had held dear, men he had elevated, men who had pledged their allegiance to him and the nation. How pervasive is it? A chilling stillness permeated Traoré's query. Extensive, sir. We've identified at least 24 active participants, with likely many more sympathetic to their cause. Traoré returned to his desk, his gait slow and deliberate. He picked up a photograph, a memento of himself and Sire, taken soon after their promotion to general. They were beaming, radiating youthful confidence and a shared ambition. He scrutinized the image, seeking some shadow of the darkness that now possessed Seer's spirit. He returned the photograph to its place, the glass chiming quietly against the polished wood. "What are our options, Captain?" Relieved by the direct question, Zongo snapped to attention. "We could arrest them immediately, sir, but that could ignite a conflict, perhaps a civil war. Their supporters are armed and well-placed." Traoré nodded, his mind a whirlwind of calculations, weighing the risks and potential outcomes of each choice. He couldn't afford recklessness. Precision was paramount. The future of Burkina Faso hung precariously. "No," he declared, his voice resolute. "We will not surrender to their thirst for war. We will expose their deeds. We will dismantle their cabal, piece by piece, without spilling a drop of blood." He met Zongo's gaze, his eyes blazing with fierce resolve. "But first, I need clarity. I must understand the why. I will speak with General Seer." Zongo's eyes widened, alarm etched on his face. "Sir, that's too perilous. He knows we are aware. He could orchestrate your demise." Traoré shook his head. "He will not. Not yet. He needs me. Or, at least, he believes he does. He thinks he can persuade me, bring me into his fold. I will exploit that illusion." He paused, his expression hardening. "Secure a discreet location, Captain. I will meet with General Seer at dawn. And Captain, alert Karim Sadu that I may require his particular expertise." The weight of betrayal settled squarely on Traoré's shoulders, yet amidst the sorrow, a core of steely determination began to form. He would not permit Seer, Moreau, or any other entity to rob Burkina Faso of its future. He would wage war, not with weapons and carnage, but with intellect, with valor, and with unwavering faith in the fortitude of his people. Dawn promised a showdown, a trial of allegiance, and a battle for the very soul of a nation. A soldier's courage. The sun, a molten hammer, pounded the training grounds, baking the ochre earth into a fine powder that danced with each forceful movement. Zongo leaned against the corrugated iron of the armory, feeling the stored heat seeping into his spine, his gaze sweeping over the recruits tackling the obstacle course. Raw power wasn't his quarry, although it was abundant. He sought something subtler. Intuition, the ability to discern the unseen currents. He needed a ghost, someone who could dissolve into the background and glean secrets. His attention snagged on a lithe soldier navigating the barbed wire with a fluid grace that hinted at long practice. Karim Sadu. The file had been unremarkable. A farmer's son from the north, adequate grades, a clean record. Yet a single comment from an instructor stood out. Remarkably perceptive. Zongo waited until Sadu completed his circuit, wiping grime from his forehead. He approached, boots stirring up the dust. "Sadu," he rumbled, his voice almost swallowed by the clamor of the training field. Sadu snapped to attention, his eyes sharp and alert. "Captain Zongo, sir, relax. Your movements are efficient." Zongo let the statement linger. "But I'm more interested in what you perceive when stationary." A slight crease formed on Sawado's brow, a momentary flicker of bewilderment. "Sir, come with me." Zongo turned toward a small, sheltered space nestled behind the armory. He halted beneath a baobab, its immense trunk offering a cool respite. "Tell me, Sadu, what do you observe?" Sadu surveyed the scene, taking it all in. "The armory, sir. The training grounds. Fellow soldiers. The baobab tree. And—" Zongo pressed, unwavering. "Beyond that." Sadu paused, then elaborated. "Sergeant Major Diallo favors his left leg, the slight limp almost unnoticeable. The recruits struggling with the rope climb, their faces etched with strain. The lieutenant locked in a heated discussion with the quartermaster." "Good," Zongo conceded, a note of satisfaction coloring his tone. "You possess a keen eye. That's a rare gift." He paused, his expression hardening. "I require someone who can see past facades, who can listen in silence. Are you capable, Sadu?" Sawado's posture straightened, his gaze unwavering. "I am, sir." Zongo sketched the situation, carefully omitting names while emphasizing the gravity of the looming threat. He spoke of the need for intelligence, for someone to penetrate certain circles and report back. The risks were substantial. Discovery would carry dire consequences. Sadu listened intently, his face a mask of composure. When Zongo concluded, he simply stated, "Understood, sir. What are my orders?" Zongo outlined his plan. A clandestine meeting was scheduled for that evening at a backstreet bar on the outskirts of Ouagadougou, a haven for off-duty officers. Sadu was to be there, a shadow in the background, absorbing the atmosphere and the conversations. He was to return to Zongo before dawn with his findings. Later that evening, Karim Sadu, clad in unassuming attire, simple trousers and a worn shirt, slipped into the dimly lit bar. The air hung heavy with the pungent aroma of stale beer and cheap cigarettes. He found a table tucked away in a shadowy corner and ordered a drink, his eyes methodically scanning the patrons. He recognized several officers from his training cohort, including a captain rumored to be a confidant of General Cyr. He nursed his drink, eavesdropping on the raucous conversations swirling around him. Most was inconsequential banter, grievances about pay, exaggerated tales of conquests, and the usual military rumors. Then, he caught it, a hushed exchange emanating from a table in the rear, a conversation barely above a whisper. He strained to decipher their words, catching fragments of sentences. The operation. Tomorrow night. All elements are prepared. He noticed Captain Bomba, a man renowned for his unwavering loyalty to General Cyr, conferring with two unfamiliar individuals. Although dressed in civilian clothes, their rigid posture and clipped speech betrayed their military background. He couldn't discern the precise details, but he sensed the urgency crackling in their voices, the weight of their words. This was it. This was the reason Zongo had sent him. He took another sip of his drink, affecting nonchalance, but his mind raced. He needed proximity. He needed more information. As he subtly adjusted his chair, attempting to gain a better line of sight, one of the men at the rear table glanced in his direction. Their eyes locked for a fleeting, unsettling instant. The man's gaze was cold, calculating. Sadu swiftly averted his eyes, pretending to be absorbed in his drink. A shiver of apprehension snaked down his spine. He had been spotted. The observer was now being observed. He finished his drink and rose, striving for a casual demeanor. He needed to extract himself to deliver his report to Zongo. But as he turned to leave, he saw Captain Bomba detach himself from his table and begin to approach. Inside the serpent's nest, the rough fabric of the pilfered uniform scratched at Karim's skin. Inside the converted storeroom, a miasma of stale beer and cheap tobacco hung heavy, a palpable tension adding to the cloying atmosphere. Tucked behind a bar near Camp Militaire Guillaume Ouedraogo, the location offered a fragile haven from loyalist eyes, while remaining accessible to the officers who frequented its shadowy embrace. He huddled in a corner, nursing a flag beer, attempting to blend into the background noise like a forgotten shadow. Thankfully, Captain Bomba, a burly man with a perpetually suspicious nature, was absorbed in a loud dispute over football across the room. Karim's attention remained riveted on the primary table, the epicenter of the clandestine affair. General Cyr's commanding voice, usually a balm of reassurance, now sparked a chilling premonition. "The hour is upon us," Cyr proclaimed, an unfamiliar flint in his tone. "Operation Red Dawn initiates at 400 hours. The presidential palace, the national television station, gendarmerie headquarters, all must be in our grasp within 60 minutes. Traoré is to be brought in." A low murmur spread across the room. Karim hung on every syllable, his pulse quickening. He recognized some. Known for his brutal efficiency, Lieutenant Tapsoba, a rising star in the Armored Corps, and a woman, Isabelle Moreau, a striking anomaly in this masculine conclave. Introduced as an attaché from the French embassy, her presence was a shock, solidifying Zongo's suspicions of external involvement. Moreau spoke with cool, precise diction, her gaze sharp and incisive. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice radiating understated power, All logistical preparations are complete. Funds have been transferred to the designated accounts. Assurances have been obtained from key international stakeholders. Your triumph is assured. Kareem's mind reeled. Finance? Global guarantees? This transcended a simple cadre of disaffected officers. It was a meticulously crafted coup, supported by influential outside actors. The blueprints continued to materialize. Some was designated to spearhead the assault on the presidential residence, while Tapsoba would utilize his armored contingent to seize the broadcast station and transmit a pre-recorded declaration announcing the formation of a transitional military council. Sear would subsequently address the nation, offering promises of stability and a restoration to civilian governance. A deceptive pledge, Kareem surmised. The conversation drifted towards contingency strategies, potential pockets of resistance, and the imperative of absolute secrecy. Bamba, his football debate apparently concluded, drifted toward Kareem's secluded corner. Avoiding his gaze, Kareem feigned detachment, taking a prolonged draw from his beer. "What of Zongo?" Tapsoba inquired, a trace of unease in his voice. "His allegiance to Traoré is absolute. He poses a threat." Sear's eyes glinted. "Zongo is under observation. He will not meddle. Provisions have been made." A glacial dread snaked down Kareem's spine. They were aware of Zongo. Were they also scrutinizing him? Bamba now loomed directly behind Kareem. He could feel the man's oppressive presence, the sharp tang of his perspiration filling his nostrils. "Hey," Bamba growled, his voice laced with menace. "Didn't I spot you yesterday? Circling Captain Zongo's office." Kareem tensed, adrenaline surging. He needed to think and fast. He forced a turn, meeting Bamba's skeptical stare with a fabricated expression of bewilderment. "Captain," he stuttered, mimicking the guileless persona of a recent recruit. I don't believe so, sir. I was posted on duty all day, guarding the supply depot." Bamba studied him, his eyes narrowed to slits. Kareem held his breath, praying his facade would endure. "Supply depot, is it?" Bamba queried, his tone remaining dubious. "Name, soldier." Before Kareem could fabricate a response, Moreau intervened. "Captain Bamba," she interjected, her voice slicing through the building tension. "We have more pertinent matters demanding our attention. Leave the boy alone. He's simply enjoying a beer." Bamba paused, then shrugged. "Very well," he grumbled, turning back toward the table. "But I have my eyes on you, soldier." Kareem released a silent sigh of relief. Moreau's intervention had spared him, but he knew he couldn't linger. He had learned too much. He needed to relay this intelligence to Zongo with haste. He drained his beer in a single gulp, rose, and sauntered toward the exit, striving for an air of casual indifference. Reaching the door, he cast a final glance back at the table. Moreau was observing him, a subtle smile gracing her lips. He couldn't decipher its meaning, amusement, or a stark warning. He stepped out into the cool night air, burdened by the weight of his discovery. He was inside the serpent's den and narrowly avoided being caught. Now, he had to deliver the antidote before it was too late. The net tightens. The weight of Kareem's revelation settled heavily in the room. Traoré, Zongo, and Kareem were huddled in the president's private study, the heavy curtains drawn against the pre-dawn light. The air hung thick with unspoken anxieties. "So, Operation Red Dawn," Traoré said, his voice a low rumble. He ran a hand over his close-cropped hair, a rare display of agitation. "Sear has chosen his side." Zongo's jaw tightened. "And Moreau? We suspected French influence, but this confirms it. They're guaranteeing success. With what, I wonder?" Kareem, still dressed in the pilfered uniform, shifted uncomfortably. The wool itched, a constant reminder of the danger he had narrowly escaped. "I heard them mention funds, sir. And assurances. I don't know the specifics." Traoré rose and paced, his boots muffled on the thick Aubusson carpet. "We can't confront Sear directly. Not yet. We need proof, irrefutable evidence to sway the loyalists within the army. A premature move will fracture the nation." He stopped pacing and looked at Zongo, his eyes sharp. But we also can't afford to wait. Red Dawn. It's clearly imminent. Zongo nodded. We have loyal men, Mr. President. Enough to counter Seer, if mobilized correctly. But a direct confrontation would spill Burkinabe blood. We must find a way to disarm them psychologically, strategically, before a single shot is fired. An idea sparked in Traoré's eyes. A message. A coded message broadcast nationwide. He glanced at Karim. The national radio station. Is it under Seer's control? Karim swallowed hard. I don't think so, sir. But I can't be certain. Captain Bomba. He mentioned something about increased security there, but it could be routine. Too risky to rely on. Zongo interjected. We have a transmitter within the Presidential Guard's headquarters. Lower range, but sufficient to reach most key military installations and loyalist sympathizers. Traoré nodded. Good. A seemingly innocuous message. Something only our people will understand. He walked to his desk and picked up a worn copy of Thomas Sankara's speeches. Sankara always spoke in parables. We'll do the same. He spent the next hour crafting the message, a string of seemingly unrelated phrases woven into a short address on national unity and the importance of vigilance. He chose words that resonated with Sankara's ideals, phrases that would trigger a specific response in the minds of his loyal supporters. The baobab stands tall against the storm, he dictated. The weaver bird builds its nest with patience. The harmattan wind whispers secrets to the earth. Let the children of Burkina Faso remember the promise of dawn. Zongo, meanwhile, began contacting his trusted officers. Each call was brief, carefully worded, using prearranged code phrases. The harvest is ripe. The blacksmith's hammer is ready. Prepare the fields. The responses were terse but reassuring. The men were ready. As the first rays of dawn crept through the drawn curtains, Traoré sat before the transmitter, the microphone cold against his lips. His heart hammered against his ribs, a counterpoint to the calm he projected. He took a deep breath and began. His voice, usually booming and confident, was deliberately subdued, almost conversational. He spoke of Sankara's legacy, of the need for unity, of the bright future that awaited Burkina Faso. And then he delivered the coded message, each phrase a carefully placed brick in the wall he was building against the impending coup. Karim, watching from the corner of the room, felt a surge of hope. He had played his part, delivered the crucial information. Now, it was up to Traoré and Zongo to navigate the treacherous currents and steer the nation away from the brink. Outside, under the cloak of the fading night, loyal troops began to mobilize. Small units, moving silently and discreetly, took up positions around key government buildings, power stations, and communication hubs. They were farmers, teachers, and mechanics, as much as soldiers, but their loyalty to Traoré and to the dream of a better Burkina Faso was unwavering. The net was tightening, but Seer was a viper, and a viper, when cornered, was most dangerous. A change of plans. The atmosphere in Seer's office thrummed with palpable tension. He stalked back and forth before the mahogany expanse of his desk, its gleaming surface reflecting the feverish glint in his eyes. The eagle has landed. He snapped into the phone, his voice a gravelly rasp. I repeat, the eagle has landed. Commence phase 2 without delay. He slammed the phone down, the sharp report echoing in the stifling silence. Sergeant Major Bomba, Ramrod Strait, hesitated. General, advancing the schedule, with all due respect, introduces certain complications. Seer spun, his face a mask of contained fury. Complications? Bureaucratic hurdles are irrelevant compared to the prospect of imprisonment. Don't you comprehend? Traoré's suspects. I sense it, the way they scrutinize me. That absurd broadcast, that veiled drivel. It's a signal, Bomba, an unmistakable sign. He raked a hand through his receding hairline, his movements jerky. They believe they're being subtle, cunning. We'll redefine cunning for them. He ceased pacing and leaned heavily on the desk, his voice dropping to a sibilant whisper. Surprise is our last remaining weapon. Allow them preparation, and we're undone. Operation Red Dawn ignites at 300 hours tomorrow. Understood. Bomba's Adam's apple danced in his throat. Perfectly, General. Outside, pressed against the chill of the concrete wall, Kareem Sadu felt his pulse hammer, a frantic tattoo, against his ribs. Cleaning Sear's office, a task usually beneath him, now seemed providential. He'd lingered, pretending to scrub an imaginary stain, close enough to glean the damning conversation. 300 hours. Tomorrow. The coup was imminent. He straightened, a surge of adrenaline sharpening his senses. Time was a luxury he couldn't afford. Risking exposure exiting Sear's office, he needed a conduit to Zongo now. He surreptitiously palmed a discarded cigarette from the ashtray, a flimsy alibi for his presence later, and hurried toward the rear entrance, his thoughts a frantic whirlwind. The presidential guard transmitter room resonated with hushed activity, bathed in the eerie luminescence of the consoles. Zongo, brow knitted in concentration, fine-tuned the frequency, ensuring the coded transmission reached its intended recipients nationwide. His phone buzzed insistently, an unfamiliar number. He paused, then answered. Zongo, he stated brusquely. A panting voice, almost swallowed by static, assaulted his ear. Captain, it's Sadu. He's accelerated it. Operation Red Dawn. 300 hours tomorrow. The connection severed. Zongo froze, a cold dread creeping into his bones. Tomorrow. Sear was escalating the timetable. He had underestimated the general's desperation, leading him to mutter a curse under his breath, a concoction of resentment and grim resolve. This altered everything. He immediately contacted Traoré, relaying Kareem's vital intelligence. The president listened in silence, his response measured but resolute. Thank you, Captain. This confirms our misgivings. Decisive action is required. Mobilize the loyalists. Immediately. Zongo acted swiftly, his ingrained training taking over. He snapped orders into the phone, his voice incisive and commanding. The coded message had served its purpose, rousing those who needed to be awakened. Now the time for combat had come. Meanwhile, Kareem, having discharged his desperate message, found himself back in the barracks, submerged in the bustle of his peers. He feigned normalcy, joking and laughing, while his mind spun with anxiety. He comprehended the stakes he had taken. Discovery equated to certain demise. However, he could not bear the notion of witnessing his country be taken by the hands of greed and power. His eyes swept around the room, dissecting each face, trying to gauge allegiances, trying to decide who had been swayed, who remained faithful, who had already chosen sides with Sear. He couldn't tell. The atmosphere felt pregnant with anticipation and submerged tension. He could only hold on to the hope that his sacrifice would sway the tide, that the soldiers of Alliance, guided by Zongo and Traoré, would be ready to face Sear head-on. He knew one thing. Tonight there would be no slumber. He had to remain alert, prepared to act, willing to stand up for what he knew to be right. Showdown at the palace. The pre-dawn air hung thick and humid, tasting of dust and diesel. Zongo, face grim beneath his helmet, gripped the handrail of the lead armored vehicle as it rumbled through the sleeping capital. Behind him, a convoy of loyalist soldiers, faces taut with nervous energy, followed in trucks and personnel carriers. Every clank of metal, every whine of the engine, amplified the tension that threatened to snap. Radio check. Zongo barked into his comm, his voice a low growl. A chorus of acknowledgments crackled back. Lieutenant Diallo at the national radio station, Captain Compare securing the airport, Sergeant Major Cone guarding the presidential residence. Each secured location was a crucial pin in Sear's map of conquest, now being systematically dismantled. The palace loomed ahead, a white monolith against the lightening sky. Zongo signaled the convoy to halt a block away. Compare, Diallo, situation report. Radio station secure, Captain. Diallo's voice reported, laced with relief. No resistance. Airport locked down, Captain, Compare confirmed. Sear's men were expecting us. A brief skirmish, but they're contained. Zongo swore under his breath. Sear knew they were coming. Karim's intelligence had been invaluable, but it also meant their element of surprise was gone. He jumped from the vehicle. "All right, listen up. We move on foot from here. Eyes sharp, weapons ready. This is our home. We defend it." The soldiers surged forward, adrenaline pumping. They moved swiftly, silently, melting into the shadows of the palace grounds. Zongo led a small squad to the main entrance, the heavy doors guarded by a detachment of presidential guards, their faces etched with confusion. "Captain Zongo, Presidential Guard, stand down," Zongo commanded, his voice ringing with authority. "General Sear is attempting a coup. You are to secure this perimeter and allow no one to enter without my express permission." There was a moment of tense hesitation. Then the captain of the guard, a young man barely out of his teens, saluted smartly. "Yes, sir." Inside, the palace was eerily quiet. Zongo's squad fanned out, securing key corridors and intersections. He could feel the weight of history in the silent rooms, the echoes of past triumphs and betrayals. Meanwhile, in his private study, President Traoré sat calmly at his desk, reviewing the latest intelligence reports. He heard the distant rumble of vehicles, the muffled shouts, but his expression remained serene. He trusted Zongo. Suddenly, the door burst open, and General Sear strode in, flanked by 2 armed guards. His face was flushed, his eyes blazing with a dangerous light. "Ibrahim," Sear said, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "This is madness. You leave me no choice." Traoré leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. "Choice? You had a choice, Sear. You chose betrayal. I chose what was best for Burkina Faso." Sear retorted, his voice rising. "You're blind, Ibrahim, blind to the decay, the corruption, the influence that bleeds us dry. And you think selling our sovereignty to foreign powers is the answer?" Traoré asked, his voice calm but laced with steel. "That power grab is the solution?" Sear scoffed. "They offer stability, progress. You cling to outdated ideals, Ibrahim. You're a roadblock to progress." He gestured to his guards. "Take him into custody." The guards hesitated, their eyes darting nervously between Sear and Traoré. They were torn between loyalty to their commanding officer and their deep respect for the president. Before they could act, Zongo and his squad stormed into the room, weapons trained on Sear and his men. "General Sear, you are under arrest," Zongo announced, his voice cold and unforgiving. "Stand down immediately." Sear's face contorted with rage. "Zongo, you dare." "I dare to defend my country, General," Zongo replied, his eyes locked on Sear's. "Something you seem to have forgotten how to do." Traoré rose from his chair, his gaze fixed on Sear. "It doesn't have to end this way, Sear. Lay down your arms. Admit your mistake. For the sake of Burkina Faso." Sear stared at Traoré, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. For a long moment, silence hung heavy in the air, broken only by the ragged breathing of the men in the room. Then, slowly, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of years of ambition and regret, Sear lowered his hand. His guards followed suit. "It's over," Sear murmured, his voice barely audible. "It's over." Zongo's men moved swiftly, disarming Sear and his guards. Traoré stepped forward, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and disappointment. He placed a hand on Sear's shoulder. "Why, Sear? Why did you do this?" Sear looked up at Traoré, his eyes filled with a deep, unshakable sorrow. I truly believed it was for the best." Traoré shook his head sadly. "There is always another way, Sear. Always. But you chose the path of betrayal." He turned to Zongo. "Take him away." As Sear was led away, Traoré looked out the window at the lightening sky. A new day was dawning, but the shadows of betrayal still lingered. A new dawn. Sear was a spent force. He stood rigidly, the fierce spark that had blazed in his eyes just hours before now snuffed out, leaving behind a desolate emptiness. A handful of his troops, those neither escaped nor seized, huddled behind him, their weapons slack, faces reflecting stunned disbelief. The plaza before the presidential residence, Once the stage for Sear's soaring ambition was now a grim tableau of scattered brass and the wreckage of his failed gamble. Traoré approached, Zongo his unwavering, silent adjunct. The air hung heavy, pierced only by the distant, mournful cry of sirens. General Sear, Traoré stated, his tone devoid of triumph, burdened with a profound sorrow. It's finished. Sear met his gaze, a fleeting blush of shame coloring his face. Yes, Mr. President, it is. He undid the clasp of his holster, the leather protesting with a creak in the stillness. He placed the pistol on the paving stones, the soft impact resonating with the shattering of his dreams. I yield. Traoré offered a curt nod, almost imperceptible. No move was made toward the weapon. None was needed. The balance of power had irrevocably shifted. The gun was now mere refuse, a discarded symbol of fractured aspirations. Take him into custody, Traoré directed Zongo, his voice a low rumble. As soldiers escorted Sear away, Traoré surveyed the city, the nascent sun painting the horizon with strokes of coral and rose. A new day was breaking, though the scars of the previous night remained etched upon the land. He had a nation to mend, a populace to reassure. Back at the barracks, Karim Saadu scrubbed the floors with diligent strokes. The rhythmic swish of his mop represented a quiet act of defiance against the tumult that had threatened to swallow everything whole. Snatching whispers danced around him. Muted exclamations of relief mingled with anxious conjectures about what lay ahead. He kept his gaze averted, feigning ignorance, but his heart hammered with a potent mix of fear and elation. He'd played his part, assisting in the preservation of his homeland. Later that morning, Traoré addressed the nation. He stood before the cameras, his face gaunt with exhaustion, yet his eyes burned with an unyielding resolve. The broadcast blanketed the airwaves, reaching every village and city of Burkina Faso. Fellow citizens, he began, his voice unwavering and resonant. Last night, a cabal within our military ranks, motivated by avarice and misguided ideals, attempted to usurp power. They sought to betray the faith you placed in them and to deliver our sovereignty to foreign influences. He paused, allowing his words to resonate. Thanks to the dedication of loyal soldiers and the fortitude of ordinary citizens, this attempt was foiled. The perpetrators have been apprehended and will face justice. He spoke of Sear's treachery, not with outright anger, but with a palpable sense of disappointment. He recognized the grievances that had fueled the unrest, the corruption that had festered within the halls of government, the inequities that plagued the nation. However, he proclaimed, his voice swelling with intensity, violence and betrayal offer no solutions. We must tackle these challenges through dialogue, through reform, through a reinvigorated dedication to the principles of justice, transparency, and accountability. He unveiled a series of immediate actions. The establishment of an impartial commission to probe corruption within both the government and the military, a thorough review of all agreements with foreign entities, and the launch of initiatives designed to empower local communities and foster economic advancement. This is not solely about punishing the guilty, he emphasized. It is about constructing a brighter tomorrow for all Burkinabe, a future where every citizen's voice is heard, where every child has the chance to flourish, where every community can prosper. He concluded his address with an appeal for unity and concord. Let us set aside our differences and collaborate to forge a Burkina Faso that is robust, equitable, and thriving. Let us demonstrate to the world that we are a nation unyielding to bribery, a people who refuse to be silenced, a country determined to steer its own destiny. The response was swift and overwhelming. Throughout the land, people flooded the streets, chanting Traoré's name, brandishing flags, and celebrating the victory of democracy over oppression. The initial trepidation and uncertainty dissolved into a wave of hope and optimism. Reforms commenced at a brisk pace. The Independent Commission, comprising esteemed judges, academics, and civic leaders, launched its investigation with unprecedented speed and openness. Within weeks, several high-level officials were implicated in corrupt dealings and summoned before the courts. Traoré also initiated a series of town hall gatherings nationwide, actively listening to the concerns of ordinary citizens and seeking their input on policy decisions. His vision was to establish a government genuinely of the people, by the people, and for the people. Karim Saadu watched the broadcast from the barracks, a surge of pride welling within him. He understood that the path ahead would be arduous, but he also knew that Burkina Faso was now headed in the right direction. He resumed his mopping, his movements now imbued with renewed purpose. He was no longer simply a cleaner. He was a citizen, a patriot, an integral part of something larger than himself. The aroma of disinfectant mingled with the crisp morning air, symbolizing the cleansing underway across the nation. A genuine dawn had broken over Burkina Faso,